2 years ago, here's what the Conservative election manifesto had to say about police and crime commissioners. Giving people democratic control over policing priorities is a huge step forward in the empowerment of local communities. Yesterday, people in local communities across most of England and Wales had the chance to feel empowered and take democratic control over policing. How can we best illustrate the turnout? Well, if this pen is the electorate, this pen top is the proportion who wanted to feel empowered. Actually, that's a little bit generous. Around 40 million people had the chance to vote, but turnout is estimated at 15%. In the West Midlands, Merseyside, Thames Valley and Essex, 12% made it to the polls. At one polling station in Newport, the number of people who voted in the 15 hours the polling station was open was 0. In Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, an independent beat the Conservative Michael Mates. In Humberside, Labour's Lord Prescott lost out to a Conservative. All the results are now in, apart from one constituency, that's Devon and Cornwall, and Conservatives have been elected to 15 of the posts, Labour 13, Independents 11, and the zero-tolerance candidate in Surrey 1. Let's talk about all of this with Jessica Grazia, former New York Assistant District Attorney and newly elected Police Commissioner for Greater Manchester, Tony Lloyd. Tony Lloyd, congratulations. Do I call you Mr. Commissioner? Is that the deal?
You might call me Tony. That's what people have been calling me for many years, so that'll do nicely.
Is it embarrassing to win on a turnout of 13.93%?
It's not embarrassing for me because I have a job to do and I intend to do that job in the interest of the people of Greater Manchester. It would be honestly negligent of my duty were I not to promise to do that and to deliver on that promise. But it's got to be embarrassing for the government because their level of incompetence in this is almost staggering. To create a new post and not explain why they'd done it, to give powers that they didn't explain to the public.
Well, presumably that was also your responsibility.
Well, we tried, but with a government which determinedly didn't advertise this post, a government that wasn't allowed, that didn't permit the use of the free post, as we'd see in general elections on much smaller constituencies, to have an election on a very, very complicated balloting system which had not been used before for the most part in many parts of England and Wales. It was all a recipe for chaos, and that's what the government had created. So yes, embarrassment there should be, but I think it should be when David Cameron looks in the mirror in the morning.
But when you start implementing whatever measures you want to implement, and we'll talk about that in due course, won't the people of your area be entitled to say, well, he shouldn't be doing that, we didn't vote for him?
No, I think in a sense that's to misunderstand the nature of democratic politics. I've been an elected politician for a third of a century. Elections give a mandate, but that mandate has to be re-earned every single day by getting out there amongst the voters, listening to them, representing them, vocalising for them and challenging those who don't deliver what the electorate expects. And that's got to be my job for the next 3.5 years. I can't sit back and say I'll leave an empty chair simply because the government made such a cock-up of this process. All
right, well, Jessica Grazia, what do you think of the democratic mandate these new commissioners have got?
Well, it's not a strong mandate, obviously. It's a weak mandate. But Tony's right. If I was in his shoes or in the shoes of any of the other newly elected police and crime commissioners, I would be saying, this is my job. I've got to do the job to the best of my ability. And it's a difficult job.
The Prime Minister looked to New York as the template for what's happening in most of England and Wales. What do you think of how it's been played out here?
I actually don't think that the American system was very well understood. I think there was a superficial understanding, and this superficial understanding was transposed over here. And that's, I think, created some of the problems that police and crime commissioners are going to face. I think a major problem is that the inadequacy of the system of checks and balances. We've had 150 years in America to try to mitigate some of the damage that can be done when one person is in control of such a powerful instrument of the state. And there hasn't been any time over here to develop those checks and balances.
What about all these politicians, these party politicians who've been elected today? Is that good for us?
I think it depends upon the person. I think what's very interesting is that the electors have rejected a lot of the the party politicians, and they've chosen independents, and they've also chosen a lot of PCCs who have a policing background. To me, that's interesting because the public recognizes that the person who controls the police should understand policing, and that's something that does happen in America. The elected district attorney is a professional prosecutor who runs for office. Likewise, an elected sheriff is a professional policeman who runs for office.
Tony Lloyd, I mean, if people are confused about what commissioners do, let me ask you a direct question. If crime falls on your watch, should you get the credit? And if it rises, is it your fault?
Well, I think it's a bit more complicated than that, and you've got to give some credibility to both the police and the role they've already played. We've seen crime dropping in Greater Manchester, nothing to do with me being in post. But obviously, the things that we know help to reduce crime in the first place and help to solve crime when it occurs. Building strong communities requires a strong police force, but it also requires strong partnerships. And it's building those partnerships that I think is a job that is, yes, for the police, but transcends the police themselves and involves many other groups, the local authority, but communities, people in residence groups, all of those who build the kind of community base that can challenge the criminal and challenge crime. Are
you confident you can get your electorate more interested by next time, briefly?
Well, that's got to be a very real test for me, but as I said earlier on, the way a politician operates a mandate isn't simply by the election and says goodbye for the next 3.5 years. It's by validating that mandate every single day, by getting out there and listening to the community and vocalising what they need to have for their own parts of the conurbation.
Tony Lloyd and Jessica de Grazia, thank you both very much.